Hi, I'm Christie Blatchford, fresh from the Liberal campaign where I caught a cold, and I do blame the Liberals for it. I began to get a bad feeling about the Justin Trudeau blackface scandal the very day after it happened. Mr. Trudeau was, I think, in Saskatoon for a rally. That became a town hall wherein, with what my late father used to call his sincere expression on his face, Mr. Trudeau took questions from people in the crowd. And one of them was obviously not a Liberal plant, though most of them were Liberal-friendly people because they were there for a rally, after all. And this young man said to him, look, can you, about the blackface thing, can you at least, give us a number, round it up. Can we round it up to 5? And Trudeau put on his gravest sincere expression, said it like that. It's an expression that it reeks of insincerity, actually, but he put on his gravest expression and he said, I don't think we should be making light of this. Well, actually, you know what, Mr. Prime Minister? We are allowed to make light of it. You shouldn't, obviously, but we, the people, can do with that whole sad story what we will. And I knew then, though, I could tell, because though it was a Liberal crowd, it was very friendly and very forgiving. And Mr. Trudeau's manner was to normalize what had happened by talking about it incessantly. I'm deeply sorry, I regret it very much. The night before he said I was pissed off at myself, yada, 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 answering very few of the questions that actually exist. In other words, who is the young woman he's standing beside in the brown face photo from his private school days? Was she a colleague? I presume she was a colleague, but she was young. Was she maybe a student? How did she feel about being, manhandled by this guy? So there's that question. Mr. Trudeau has said 2 opposing things at various times about why he didn't come forth. He said, the first time I think he said, look, I was embarrassed. I didn't remember. I didn't tell anybody because I was embarrassed. I think the other time he said, I can't remember. He didn't remember the third instance, which is apparently, this is the Global Television obtained video where he's standing in blackface, again, on the parts of his body that are visible, even, I think, a pair of jeans that are split. And the Liberals have said, that was taken when he was a river guide. And I thought, I haven't been a river guide, but I've done river rafting trips. And I don't recall ever packing in my knapsack a thing of blackface, whatever, black makeup. I didn't do that. I'm sure no one does that. Who thinks of it? So anyway, that was the dress-up day. And it was quite a dress-up day, it turns out, at the river guiding thing. How old was he in each instance? We know he was 29, almost 30, when at the private school in Vancouver where he was teaching, he wore brown face. Then there was the incident in high school, and I'm certainly prepared to forgive anybody any sin while they're in high school, because young people do dumb things all the time. I certainly did. I was just lucky enough to do them in a non-social media era. But nonetheless, that's 2 times. And then there's this river thing when he was a river guide. That's 3. Are there more? He clearly loves dressing up in and pretending to be somebody else, some other color than white. The latest business is, in addition to saying, I'm deeply sorry, I let everybody down, I'm begging forgiveness. He's going to get forgiveness. I predict he's going to get it. He's going to be reelected. Because now his line is, well, I was always very aware I was privileged, very privileged, and that I had white privilege. But now, only now do I see that with that white privilege comes a great gaping blind spot. Well, there are a whole bunch of people in this lucky country of ours where we are lucky enough, many of us, to be born into relative privilege. I was the daughter of a hockey rink manager and a typist. And I still lived in relative privilege. And there are millions of us who don't have that particular blind spot. So how does he think he got that blind spot? Anyway, Friday in Toronto, he was greeted when he did his little glad handing thing along the Danforth with, generally I'd say, a few hoots and hollers, but pretty good spirits, pretty forgiving crowd. And it seems to me it underlines the sort of liberals I have often found always have a sense, or often have a sense, that they are just somehow better and smarter than the rest of us. It comes, I think, with being the natural governing party in this country, particularly in Ontario and Quebec. So people are prepared to accept Mr. Trudeau's failing here as our failing because we're privileged and we had this blind spot. Well, lots of us didn't have the blind spot. But forget that for a moment. It makes him seem almost like a victim when he goes woebegone before the camera and says, you know, I am deeply ashamed, I am deeply sorry, I deeply regret it. That's nice. He's apologizing, but he's also normalizing what he did somehow by talking about it so much, by getting people accustomed to seeing this new contrite version of himself. And I think in a couple of days, this is all going to wash away because liberals, and it is mostly liberals in this part of the world, in Ontario and Quebec, liberals are going to forgive him because I guess they think that when we make that kind of mistake, we know that we don't really mean it. We're not making the mistake because we're actually racist. It's because we're a victim of our white privilege. Oh my God. Can you imagine what would have happened to any other leader who had been caught, not once, not twice, but 3 times wearing black or brown face makeup and dressing up like a yahoo? I mean, this is not who most of us are, even though we may have white privilege and be bad people sometimes. Anyway, he's going to get away with it. Mark my words. Andrew Scheer would have been done. Maxime Bernier, any of the conservative types would have been done. But the liberals have always had a lock on the moral high ground in this country, and I fear they still do.